For independent film, the chances of people making their money back is really, 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 really small. And you have to lead with that to be ethical. So why should they give you their money? It's got to be for something else. Half the money I raised from people from my life, and then half the money I raised from people who were local to Louisville. So it was very personal to people who were local to Louisville, even if we had just met, because the place was deeply important to them and they want to care for and respect their community.
Just wanted to point out before we start, so we have 3 very different projects here. We've got Jaripeo, which is a feature documentary, Piggy at the Pool Party, a narrative short, and Sad and Beautiful World, which is, again, a narrative feature, an international narrative feature. So before we launch into it, I just wanted to ask the audience, who's familiar with fiscal sponsorship? All right, roughly a lot of you. So, all right, I won't go too much into the details then of fiscal sponsorship, but rather than just say, so Film Independent is one of the many film sort of organizations, non-profit organizations that has a very robust fiscal sponsorship program, and it's basically a method where you can solicit charitable donations for your project. We have a rolling deadline and you can apply at any time, and if you've got any questions, please just email fiscalsponsorship@filmindependent.org to have your questions answered. So in the meantime, let's talk a little bit more about each of these projects and talk about where fiscal sponsorship factored into your fundraising. And we'll start at the end with Jen, because I know you came to us in post-production, I think.
So that movie, I was part of a movie called Joyland, and sort of learned indie. So I come from television, and I worked at Sundance for many years, and I was like, I'm gonna be a TV producer. And then we were at FX for many years and didn't get a TV show on there. And my business partner, April, very, very smartly said, we need to make a movie. We just sort of got our PhD, and there was a lot of fiscal sponsorship in that feature as well. And one of the things that I learned through that was, that situation was American money in Pakistan. It was sort of dumb. If you think about it, just on, we loved Sign, we believed in the project, but none of us at the time were thinking about recoupment. So when I entered, I met the director of SAD because the DP of Joyland was the DP of this movie, and so we felt very comfortable sort of with that relationship, and we sort of took a step back and said, okay, how can we make a movie that we sort of know sets us up for, being, smart producers in terms of recoupment. So that is how that movie was put together. It was a German, Lebanese, Greek, American co-production. Our co-pro agreement, I think, was 60 pages or 70. I mean, it was something insane. I didn't even know what I was signing at the end. And we came to you and are still coming to you because now we're entering the Oscar race. For our last, I think $100,000 came through, and that was after we edited and knew that we needed money for Venice, and at that point I didn't really have shame behind asking people for money because we had a film, we could show footage, and it was the time of year where people were starting to look at their charitable trusts, which I'm sure Daniel can get into, and so they were more than willing, when we said, okay, we want to finish the movie. And that's how I've been using it. In fact, we've used it for my business partner shot a short. Half that money was through fiscal sponsorship. We obviously use it a lot in Joyland, and this one. So I really think, it's a great fit because it's basically America's version of grants and non-recoupable money. That's, very, very active in Europe, but not as active here. And so that's how I sort of look at it. That was really long, sorry.
That's okay.
I'll be shorter next time.
Unpack. Well, Izzy, let's go to you because you're Izzy, Piggy at the Pool Party. Sorry, not Izzy at the Pool Party. Piggy.
Do you know what? The little girl who played Piggy, her name is also Izzy.
That's amazing.
Well,
so I was Big Izzy, she was Little Izzy.
Well, so this was the second project you'd had with us after your feature Going Nowhere. So explain how you decided to, come back to the well, so to speak, and how you utilized fiscal sponsorship in putting together the budget for actually both the feature and the short.
Well, first of all, Daniel's the nicest always accommodating.
So true.
So that's one big reason why we came back. The other big reason is that Film Independent is really reputable, and if people are looking at the website who don't work in film, or you send them over to the folks at Film Independent, and it's legit. Like people are supposed to write a check and just send it somewhere, and we want to make sure that everybody who gives us money, us meaning me and my friends and the projects that we make, that they feel really confident in that process. So I made a micro budget feature. I had a short film that got into a really big festival. And that was March. Is this working? Yes. That was March of 2020. And I suddenly had all this momentum, but obviously nobody could leave their house. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to make a tiny feature with my friends and just learn how to make a movie. I guess I want to be a filmmaker, so how about I make a movie and then I'll learn, and by the end of it I'll have a film. And that's what we did, and it was completely insane. And we shot in Louisville, Kentucky. Highly recommend. Louisville is awesome. And are we sure that this is working? It's going in and out, right? Okay, try to switch. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. And so the process with that was, again, I had from the short before that, it was $2,000, and I paid for it myself. And I'd never
$2,000 total.
Yeah, girl.
That's worth a clap, by the way. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, and it. Anyways, I won't toot my own horn, but I'm proud of it. And so the feature, everyone's like, you know what drives me insane, guys, is like everybody's like, it's so easy to make a feature these days, guys. Just shoot it on an iPhone. It's like, I'm sorry. Don't we need a sound mix? And don't we need to pay a crew to light it so you can see somebody's face? Like, don't we need to color it? Like, I don't, Anyways, so I made the smallest budget film I could possibly make, and obviously people have made smaller films, feature films than this, but my budget for my feature ended up being $125,000. And thank you. And a big reason we went to Louisville is because we could get a lot of things for free. We got an 8-acre farm for free for a week and a half. We got all this stuff, and basically, I asked everybody I'd ever met for money who was in a position to give me money. And I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be speaking specifically about fiscal sponsorship, aren't I?
Not necessarily, but that was going to be my next question.
I'm gonna get to it, I promise.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, anybody who could give me $5,000 or more, I said, okay, you can be an equity investor. But I also came across certain people in my community who had a trust, and they wanted to write off a charitable donation on their taxes. And so what I learned when I was making my feature is that everybody who gives you money for your movie is buying an experience, and it is your job to figure out what experience they're purchasing and to provide that experience for them. And so some people were lawyers, and they're like, I'm just so curious about what the contracts look like for films. I was like, no problem. Here are all the contracts, and here's my lawyer's phone number. Other people really wanted to get local crews in Kentucky working. I'm like, absolutely, me too. Other people wanted to support me and also get a really sweet tax write-off. So that's how we came to fiscal sponsorship with the feature, and then it was such a great experience that we did it again with a short.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So, Sarah, I guess same question. So when did you sort of factor in fiscal sponsorship as being part of your financing plan?
Yeah, I think especially in documentary, because so much of documentary funding can come from the grant space, which is maybe not always true in narrative. I don't know, but I think in documentary, a lot of grants actually require you to have a fiscal sponsor. So it's less of like an option, but we did also, I'd say on my other project, we actually, which is not a Film Independent fiscal sponsor, but I think we loved our experience with fiscal sponsorship on Jaripeo, but on Burn Scar, and with Jaripeo, we won a grant called Chicken and Egg, and that they required that it go through your fiscal sponsor. And so, there's also people who are, directly interested when it comes to documentary with the issues, right? Like, do you have somebody who is invested in telling a story about queer cowboys in Michoacan? Do you have somebody who is invested in climate stories, which is my other project? And so you can go to these foundations who care about those things and similarly say, this is a tax write-off. But with my other project, fiscal sponsorship, I will say recently just came into play in a way we weren't expecting, which we never expected to do a crowdfunding on this project. I was like, I can't bring myself to do a GoFundMe campaign. It's too stressful. I can't do a Kickstarter, too stressful. And that project went through, I don't know if people in this room are familiar with ITVS. So this project went through ITVS. The other project was in the most recent round to be selected in the open call. And with the shuttering of CPB, we lost $400,000. So that is kind of like the state of the documentary market, sadly, right now. But what happened was we were sort of like, well, shit, what are we going to do? We have to finish getting this film made. We never thought we would sort of go out to our community and ask people, especially when everybody is really struggling right now in this market. But we decided to sort of use that, the CPB shuttering, our loss of money, as like a rallying cry. And we sent out we didn't do a Kickstarter, we just sent out emails to everyone we knew. And we were able to link to our fiscal sponsorship page and say, hey, this is a tax write-off. And if you know anybody who cares about this issue, who cares about public broadcast, who cares about documentary, who cares about specifically climate films or, the films about a wildfire, please pass this along. And we were able to also get it in front of foundations that way, that, again, require a fiscal sponsor. And so I would say on that film, fiscal sponsorship it got us to, when we talk about financing piece by piece, it literally got us to the next piece of our money puzzle, which was getting to picture lock. So it was huge to have fiscal sponsorship, yeah.
Well, let's talk then a bit about financing structures. So in terms of Jaripeo, how much did fiscal sponsorship factor into your overall financing, and what were your other sources, if you're allowed to talk about them?
I'm definitely allowed to talk about them. I would say fiscal sponsorship was not a huge factor in it. So because not all of... So ITVS was a huge part of that puzzle, and they don't require can people hear me? Yeah, okay. ITVS doesn't, it's a co-production. They don't require a fiscal sponsor. And so that's where the majority of our budget came from. We got $375,000 from ITVS for Jaripeo. And then our other sources, sort of when it came to financing the project, both projects, documentary, you have the luxury of financing in stages because we've been making these films for 4 years. And so you're saying, okay, what do I need to get me to this stage and this stage and this stage? So the first stage, development, our own money. We're investing our own money, and we're like, we hope something happens. The next year of Jaripeo, we actually didn't film, and we just sort of tried to fundraise and applied to grants and applied to a huge part of the documentary ecosystem, I would say, is these pitch forums. So I don't know if that's true in narrative, but pitch forums are huge for getting your film in front of financiers and grants. And these pitch forums are sort of co-signing your project, saying, this is good, pay attention to it. So we did a lot of them for Jaripeo. I think we did like 6. And
sorry, were they here in the US or were they?
They were both. So the first one we did was the Points North Fellowship, which I highly recommend for anyone who does documentary. It was like the greatest experience. And that was like momentum from there. I can't say how valuable it was. We started getting grants after that. We got a chicken and egg grant. We got a Sundance grant. We got a SF Film grant. And we continued to get into festivals internationally. The international festivals, also with the money situation in the US being so bleak, getting in front of like other countries and financiers in other countries and meeting producers in other countries that you can make co-production deals with. We have a co-production deal with a French co-producer, which has allowed us to access funds in France. And we are also funded by Arte, which is like PBS in France. Sorry, I'm now rambling, and I don't know if I answered your question. I'm sorry.
Yes,
But,
no,
okay,
you did.
Great.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to go to Jen then and talk about in the fiction world, is there an equivalent of the sort of the pitching environment, or how does one go about sort of putting together a co-production?
Yeah, I was laughing because we were doing trying to finish the DCP, getting all like all of the labs and grants that Cyril, the director, had, and it was like it's literally like 20 people. I mean, he went through everything. And similar to what you were saying, when we made Joyland, we let them film with not the full budget. And I was like, I'm never doing that again. And I did the exact same thing on this one. For a myriad of reasons. Obviously the war was getting closer to Lebanon, and we sort of felt like we had to strike. Then, in terms of just like getting the crew was willing to sort of do it, and his wife was pregnant, and it was all these things telling us we had to shoot. The thing about I had an amazing co-production partners, and I think it's the same thing advice I give about when I was at Sundance, like who your producing partner is basically who you're going to be like living with the next like 5 years. And it really became Georges, the Lebanese producer, and myself. I mean, it was at one point I would wire money, I'd wire money in tranches because we didn't know if we were going to get shut down. So like every 3 days he'd be like, okay, wire me money. And he would literally be at the bank and like grab the money out. He paid people in cash. I mean, it was like insane to do this, and my husband was like, what is happening? But we really trusted each other, and he is so well known in the MENA territory that he had brought in around $750,000 of non-recoupable money. So I didn't understand the international world because, like I said, the Joyland equity structure was pretty straightforward. And what I didn't realize is they don't pay you all at once. So like, okay, great, we got a big $200,000 grant and a couple MGs and stuff, but they don't give you the money all at once, which I did not, very naively understand. So then I had to go get a cash flow loan. And then the German money didn't come in all the way. And so then I had to go back to, and re-raise money. So it is sort of a constant puzzle of, if you looked at our waterfall, I would have to explain it. I would be like, I think it's this way, but, because there's like 7 different recoupments. Because some of these, I realized halfway through that one of the German grants, $10,000, which is very arbitrary, is recoupable. And so we had to like put it down, as junior equity. So all these things were happening, and that's really what really happened was we knew we were going to be in a festival. I did not raise for that because I just needed to finish the film, and I had to go back to some people and say, hey, I need to be able to travel, people to the festival. And one of the investors in Joyland had done the same thing for us. And so she watched the film and loved it. And, she basically carried us the last $100,000 of the movie. And you think you don't need that. And all of a sudden, you do. I mean, I was like, oh, I got it. And then I was like, oh, I actually needed that money, which I'm really grateful for. So I just think it's what I love about international filmmaking is that there's no one way to make it, right? And there's all these, and with the right partners, it can be because I have heard other experiences that weren't as positive as mine, but it was stressful like all filmmaking, but it was worth it because George really knew what he was doing. I raised the equity against and it's much easier to tell an investor. I mean, I'm an American who raised money for a movie shot in Beirut that's in Arabic. I mean, it's, imagine me trying, and it's all American investors. So, I really believed in the filmmaker. We had footage, because with the grant money, I was able to actually get almost the entire film shot. So I could show them rough scenes and they were able to see what this movie was, which was a much easier process. So that's how we did it.
But to be clear, those grants did not come from the US, is that right?
We had one grant coming from the US and we had the rest are all, we had France, we had a grant coming, I mean, you name it. We had three out of Germany, and then we did the MDM and the HF&M fund. And then we did, I mean, I think there's like nine different sources besides just the straight equity that we raised. And then we had, like I said, the last $100,000 came from American fiscal sponsorship.
And I think that's the thing as well to remember about fiscal sponsorship is it can be that useful tool in terms of raising money for outreach. Yeah. Or especially for development or pre-production, like you said, when you're spending your own money, that could be the time to go out to people and say, hey, I've got this idea. Even if it gets you $1,000 to $10,000, that's money that you're not having to spend.
I want to tell you a secret. Hold on. The one thing I realized, go to your like Google friends. Okay, I think you can, and you know I figured this out halfway. So they can donate $10,000 and Google doubles it. So I went to like 5, I did a YouTube lab. Yes.
Yes, I was going to mention.
Yeah, so and it like adds up very quickly. So 2 of our investors worked at Spotify. And they went to a couple of their friends because once again, it was like the time of year where they were looking at their giving gifts. And we had footage, and that $10,000 became $20,000 to us. And that's a huge amount of money for a tiny movie. So yeah, sorry, that was one thing I wanted to tell all of you. Yes, and actually, remember the first one? You should tell them what happened because she didn't donate. It went into the general fund, and then poor Daniel had to like redo it all.
Yeah, so a lot of these larger companies like Google or Apple or Disney or Netflix or all these people have a matching donation.
Netflix
program.
triples.
Yeah. So basically, if you have a friend who's an employee of this organization, they can make a donation through the company's portal. The company will match it. Usually they'll double it, as Netflix will triple it in some situations. And so basically you get double the donation. So your friend is giving their donation, then the company's matching it. And it's a good way to leverage a company that might be feeling guilty about its footprint on the world.
That was exactly my rationale.
The only problem with matching donations, and I will throw this in as a caveat, is they take forever to come through.
It's like 30 days, I think, after.
Oh, well, now it's 3 months to 6 months sometimes for people to see their donations through. So don't do it if you're in a really severe time crunch, but you can plan it out in advance. And there's also a little way around that, which I don't feel comfortable talking about in front of everyone, but come see me afterwards.
Email you.
Yeah. Well, Izzy, so you funded your entire project, Piggy, through fiscal sponsorship this time around. Is that correct?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Correct.
So tell me, how was your financing structure put together?
Wow, it was so fast and easy. No, it wasn't. So like I said, I made the 2 films. I made a short film for $2,000, and then I made a tiny, Duplass Brothers style first feature because that was accessible to me. And the next film, the Piggy, which you guys saw the trailer for, I was trying to make another feature. It wasn't coming together, the strikes, et cetera, we all know. And I was like, okay, I'm going to scale it back and I'm going to make something that's short form but cinematic. That was my intention. I was like, I don't have anything in my portfolio. I'm a writer, actor, director. I don't have anything in my portfolio that is, I feel, visually elevated, where it's really... I kind of describe it as surgical, where it's like very fine tuned. My short I shot in an afternoon in my friend's house. My feature was highly improvised. I want to tighten this up so that I can, moving forward for my next feature, which I'm currently packaging, have something really tight and that I feel good about. And it took. And so because of that, I was like, I need more cash. I need some more money, please. And it took me a really long time to find it because the films that I make are stories from my life. A lot of weird stuff happens, and I like to write about it. And so it's not mission-driven. It's not political commentary. I talk a lot about sexuality and taboo and women, and there aren't a lot of the grants out there. I don't meet the criteria. And so it has been challenging for me to find funds. I was invited to do a reading for a friend of mine who is making a feature with this particular person producing, and his producer and I connected, and his name's Jason DeBeer, and I'll go into and I'll explain why I'm mentioning his name in just a moment. And he had just launched his own film company after having collaborated with an A-list actor for many, many years, and is extremely passionate about all kinds of filmmaking, but specifically narrative filmmaking, and was in his own right trying to sort of make a name for himself, sort of separate from this other person that he's been working with forever. And sort of decided that maybe making a short film would be great because it's faster than a feature. And so he decided to become an equity investor. And after making my film, he has actually launched a short film fund called Escape Route Shorts. Write it down. Anybody who's trying to look for money for shorts, he gives up to $50,000 in equity investment. It's rolling. It's just him, and if he likes your script, he'll chat with you. If you go on the website, I asked him to keep an eye out for Film Independent Forum. It's you can write that as how you found out about it, and so I think the quality of the work of this community is higher than probably just anybody on the internet. So so that's how I came into some equity investment for my short film. And then we didn't get a permit while we were shooting, and the neighbors called the cops, and it cost me an extra $17,000. And thankfully, I'd raised an extra 10, but get a permit in Los Angeles is the moral of this story, and that's where fiscal sponsorship via Film Independent came into play. And if I'm still in debt, so the portal's still open, guys. Just saying.
I did not know that about the permit, but yes, maybe go to Louisville, Kentucky to shoot.
Louisville, you call the permit office in Louisville, they're like, are you going to block the street? And you're like, no. They're like, stop calling us. So very different vibe.
Okay. So you mentioned this a little bit earlier, Izzy, and Sarah as well. Like when you're approaching donors, as opposed to investors, what kind of things are you saying to them? Are you leading with the tax break, or are you trying to appeal to their more sort of interest in the project themselves? Anyone? And Jen as well, this applies to you.
I would say we're always leading with the project. I definitely know that there are people out there who really are able to use like they have a lot of rich people in their lives. I am not one of those people. Truly, any rich people, please come talk to me. But I'm like, that's the next stage of my producer journey is I need to meet more rich people. That is my goal for the next 10 years. But I do know that is a thing that a lot of people do is like, hey, I'm going to go out to people I know and say, this is a tax break. That hasn't really been the thing for us. It really has been, we're applying for grants. We are, filling out so many grant applications, constantly revising our materials, constantly thinking about who are we talking to and how can we adjust those materials to fit the needs of their interests. And really appealing with Burn Scar, it really was like, we are appealing to the moment that we're currently in and the fact that so many people I know are being affected by government layoffs and things like that. And so it was really this was a huge loss of not just money for the project, massive amount of money, but also our own income and being able to go out to people and sort of appeal in that way to people who know us and care about us. So, and I do think that the fiscal sponsorship portion of it probably allowed people to feel like they could donate more than they might have. Yeah.
Awesome. And Izzy, you said you were offering a more experiential kind of benefit to a potential donor.
Yeah, the way you phrased that makes it sound like something else, but not that kind of experience. But yeah, no, I think, when you invited me to speak on this panel, I was like, what am I going to say? What should I say? And I think as, as a writer and as an actor, and I'm sure many people in the audience are those things as well, directors, etc. We put ourselves in the shoes of our characters. Like, that is essential to the storytelling process and the reason that we care at all to make films and watch films. And I think, it's, for me, I've been on my own journey about my relationship to money in general, and having grown up in like a lot of different economic stratas, I can at times feel resentful of people who have a lot of money. And I think that it's important for us to put ourselves in their shoes, and it can be really alienating to have those kinds of funds. And like, we want to incentivize people to give us money, and also, I think for independent film, the chances of people making their money back is really, 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 really small. And you have to lead with that to be ethical. So why should they give you their money? It's got to be for something else. One person wanted a part in my movie. I was like, have no fear. I already wrote a part for a middle-aged man who wants to be in my movie. It's 3 pages. I literally already wrote it. You want to read it? And he was in my movie. He's like, I'll do it for $2,500. I was like, it costs $10,000. This part costs $10,000. Would you like to be in the movie? Because I can't make it without your money. So it's like, there are certain, like, everybody has their own agenda. And I think having compassion for that agenda is something that I have really worked on. And has helped me raising funds, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think we, both times that I've used it, and I would say even with April, because my business partner, we shot her proof of concept. And when I say it was, a stepping stone to the movie it was not, apples to apples. Alina, who's the main character, was in it, but everybody else was cast different when we did the feature. And so I've been on the other side of like being an investor. So I think, to your point, like I absolutely had an agenda. Yeah. We were like, TV's, stalling. We need to go make something. And so I had much more compassion on this side. I also saw the power of footage, and I think you can sort of sit there and like plan. At some point, there is a little bit of magic of being like, hope this works, and even on, I'm prepping for a much bigger movie now, and it's still that way to some degree. I mean, it's less so, but it's still, and I remember George, my Lebanese producer, was like, it's going to be okay. I was the like terrified American. He's like, we got this. Like, it is okay. Because, I had 47 people on the payroll. And so I have called Apoorva, the lead producer, many a times. That's the other thing, I really went to other producers and was like, how did you ask people for money? Like, who should we? And when the footage started coming out, the first person, to Izzy's point, was an American but grew up in Beirut, but he went to college here and then stayed. And through him, I didn't even show him footage, actually. He gave money. I mean, you can tell in a meeting if someone's really interested. And I knew almost by the time I ended that meeting that the money was going to come in. And then he brought in like 3 of his friends after he saw this. We sent like 3 scenes. And I think that was, I wasn't scared to ask, for money anymore, because I saw in that particular community, how much a movie from Beirut that doesn't have war at the center of it, like, it's revolutionary for that community. Because when you think of that, that region, that's certainly the first thing I was thinking of. And they just felt so proud that, it was a normal love story about just 2 people trying to stay together on a country that can be very relentless and unforgiving. And so I believe the story because I was sitting in the edit. And I think that's the other thing, like, as a producer, that's your job. You believe in the story. And so that infectious belief, investors do come in. And the first thing I say is like, listen, it's hard to recoup. I've done as best as I can, right? By mitigating the risk, by bringing in all this international, non-recoupable money, but you never know. And we had a whole strategy of like, the festival target, and we had foreign sales agents. So we had done a lot of things that I had not done previously on the film before we went to actual for the festival run. So I think that was really important to have that. People can feel your passion, and they want to give money because they believe in whatever it is that you're presenting, if you believe in it.
Sarah, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about foundations, because you mentioned those, but they'd have been important in your fundraising. They're kind of a bit of a mystery, I think, to a lot of people, is how to approach them, because often their contact details aren't easily accessible. How did you find, how did you work out which foundations were going to be receptive to you, and how did you sort of go about making contact?
I wish I had a better answer, because most of the foundations we received funding from for Jaripeo are like open call type foundations. So Sundance, Chicken and Egg, SF Film, all of those are open call. For Burn Scar, we did receive $50,000 from a foundation called Random Good. And we got in touch with them through director friend. So they had given, use your network, obviously. And it's hard to reach out to people and say, when everybody is trying, you're like cannibalizing each other to some extent. But using your network, going out to people and saying, hey, I saw that this company, this organization gave you money, because there are a lot of foundations out there that don't have their contact information, that are sort of like, they are the people that you meet at these forums, at these pitch forums. They come to you because they hear about your project, or you have a direct connection. So it's really about reaching out to the people looking at who's at the end of the credits list, and if you know anyone who worked on that production, reach out to them and say, hey, so we knew somebody who they had funded before, and they introduced us, and we sent the guy our project, and we knew that they did climate films and that they cared about that. And it was really like us pitching the project to him, saying we really believe in this, but also, him pitching us on the pillars that he cares about, and us being like, we fit those pillars. Let us tell you how we fit those pillars. So yeah, I think it's look at the credits list and see if you know anyone who knows those people, and pitch forums. If you're doing documentary, I cannot tell you enough how important pitch forums are to get your project in front of people who have foundations. Yeah.
And I would say, yes, so always read the credits, and look for names that reoccur in the credits, I think, of different films, because they're usually people with the money. But also the importance, something that seems to have come up in this conversation, is the importance of labs, development kind of things, like film, not to Film Independent's horn, but we are here at the Film Independent Forum. And we have a large range of labs and programs for both documentary and fiction. And all of those involve a networking aspect where we'll introduce you to people in the industry, and the name of your project is getting out there in the trades and things like that. So anytime you can be involved in some kind of forum, whether it's giving you money or development or any sort of thing, is going to be a plus for your project and increase visibility, and hopefully lead to you meeting someone who can give you some financing. All right, on that note, we're kind of almost wrapping up, but I wonder if there is, having been through these experiences, what do you wish you knew going in, and what advice would you give to people?
Okay. I think, the market is constantly changing. And so I think trying to adjust to the market is really, really important. Like where I was 4 years ago when we started this film, where small independent documentary companies were still giving funding to small independent documentaries, like that has largely gone away. And because many of those companies are beholden to streamers and the streamer mandates. And so I think it's really important to look at where the market is now, think about what edge does your project have? Jaripeo, the edge was that it had international appeal, I would say. And so we were really able to get into these international markets and find funding abroad. So that's one edge. But I think also just where I was, so anyone who's applied to any grant knows this question, which is, what is your audience? And it's like, the way I answered that question 4 years ago was like, my audience is everybody. Like, everyone's gonna love this film. And actually, it's such an important question to think about, like, who is your audience? What edge does this film have? That will inform your financing strategy. So if my audience is like, art house filmmakers and international, which is Jaripeo, the international market, I can go to those places. If my audience is the festival circuit, if maybe your film has a celebrity in it, like that's a streamer film, And so I think it's a really important question to think about and answer intentionally, and that will inform your financing strategy.
What was the question?
Okay, so what do you wish you knew going in, and what a bit of advice you would offer people who are starting out on this journey?
I think this is sort of applies to my future, because my future was like the most aggressive financing endeavor. I was making it with people I really care for, and we were all making it together. And I thought that meant that we would all be going out looking for money together. That wasn't a correct assumption. And I took it really personally. And asking for money is developing a tolerance for being uncomfortable. That's what it is. And I asked for a raise at my day job yesterday, and I was like, ugh. And I'm like, you know what? I've been invited to speak on a panel this weekend about asking for money. So I think I can manage this discomfort, even though this is, So it's, I put every single relationship in my life on the line to make my future. And it's about, for me, my experience, because, again, I wasn't able to go out to corporations. I wasn't able to go out to foundations. They weren't professional relationships for that particular project, which was my first big project. These were relationships where they started out as personal relationships, people from my community, and then half the money I raised from people from my life, and then half the money I raised from people who were local to Louisville. So it was very personal to people who were local to Louisville, even if we had just met, because the place was deeply important to them, and they want to care for and respect their community. As did I, even though I at the time was new there. Now I know the mayor. His name's Craig. He's great. So I just would say that, raising money is hard, and have a community of people who care for you, but don't expect them to risk their relationships also for your project. I think that's a really big lesson I needed to learn. And I'm never going to do it again like that.
Yeah, I would say for me, I come from Sundance Labs, so I'm like, I can develop. I feel like I actually can develop, but when the script was ready and we all decided, I had no understanding that I almost did nothing creative when the shoot happened, because I was just trying to handle the money, right? And the contracts and everything. I just was like, oh, I'm just gonna look at dailies every day, and I'll it's like a delusional, right? When I was just constantly putting up. I had no understanding, right, of what. And even, even after at the premiere, I was the one who was like, who has paid for the cocktail hour? You're just constantly, as Ritesh was there, was my intern at Sundance, by the way. But you're never, and it's sort of lonely at those moments, right? Because you're sort of everyone's sort of celebrating, and you're the one thinking about the budget or what needs to get delivered or whatever. And it's worth it, but I did not understand that the second it transitions, that's your job is to really make sure that the people feel secure and the money is there, which sounds so basic, but it really, and I think the advice I would give is really understand. I was sort of shocked how people had not read all the previous contracts. So, for example, we had money from ART, who has been a wonderful partner, and the original contract was a gross deal, not a net deal. And I was reading it because I had to secure the cash flow loan against these MGs and money grants that were coming in, and I was like. And thankfully, my Lebanese producer was like, oh shit, went right back to them and fixed it. But like, imagine the CAMA, figuring that out, like when you're putting together the CAMA. And even though I wasn't as familiar or comfortable, getting used to asking for money, I have no problem asking people for money. But what I'm scared about is contracts, because it's like all these words I don't understand. And it's like, whereas with quotes, and you're like, who's this you're just trying to. But it really matters. Like, you have to be just as good as passionate about the story and the creative, and as knowledgeable in those contracts, because it does come back to bite you. It's sort of shocking if those T's are not crossed and the dots of the I's. It will come back to haunt you. And I think that's the biggest advice I could give somebody, is really know your finance structure inside and out and what you're signing. Have a good lawyer. And I was like, oh my God, a tiny thought. I've spent so much money on lawyers, but I'm so happy, because it was like, someone else looking at it and making sure that this was right, and all the, director's agreement matched the, because it matters. And I just didn't understand that was part of the all-encompassing job.
Awesome, thank you. I'm not sure how much time we have left. 4 minutes?
So exact.
Oh, so yes, exactly.
I like it.
Let's try and squeeze in a question or two from the audience. A woman with blonde hair.
I would say that the one that the most complicated is Canada. So, you cannot, as an American producer, if you take the telefund money, you cannot be, you could have to be an EP essentially. That has come up in one of our projects, and we have basically said to the director, we don't want to, encumber this anymore. We will drop down to EPs, because basically telefund can fund, almost the entire movie, and it's just sort of unfair. There's no treaty between Germany, and so the project originated, the chain of title, which this is important to know. So Germany, you cannot share. They need chain of title, and so try like telling American investors this. So they bent the rules, and we shared the chain of title a third. And that was part of like why the co-production agreement was so long, and we don't need a treaty with Germany. So and they originated the project. So, and obviously in the MENA territory, treaties are the last thing. Like there's no. But and George is French, my Lebanese producer. So if we have a France partner, but we went through him, because we sort of avoided the American, but you can work with French. I mean, it's just a little more complicated. Germany money, if this is good to know, you have to spend 150% of the 100% that they give you. So you basically cannot hide. You have to like spend it in Germany. We can talk about offline other creative ways to do that, but that money and that's a thing. Oh, that's a very, very important thing. Just because they say that you're going to get $250,000 does not mean, when it trickles down into the budget, that you as the producer are spending $250,000. There's a lot of local and regional things that you have to meet and pay for, and translations and things. And so I took it literal. I was like, yeah, we have $250,000 from Germany. And that's not what actually went into the budget. And so you're always having to ask, and nobody should get upset at you if you're asking, hey, how does this money actually work? I also I was in like a WhatsApp group, and one of the producers teaches at Columbia, and he was like, oh, I've done a German co-production, and ping me, and I'm going to walk you through. And I had a meeting with him, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to set up that way. And he was exactly right. I should have done exactly what he said, because it wound up, after I finally went through the co-production agreement, it wound up with what he had actually advised. So, it was a little bit of a learning, obviously a huge learning curve for me. And I had good partners, and we all believed, that we wanted to make Cyril's movie. And I think to your point of like, or I think Izzy said this, like, I supported I wanted to support another first-time filmmaker who was telling a story that could transcend. You know, I think the thing about Joyland that we knew as Americans is it's about a family, right? It's about a woman. I mean, obviously there's a relationship, but it's about a woman. You're watching her sort of lose her autonomy, and as a mother and as a wife, you know, and it's like this existential crisis, and that's what the movie was about. And I think that's why it was so. I mean, obviously Simon's a brilliant filmmaker, but April and I were interested in telling a story in a specific region that could transcend here, and I think that was very intentional. So we found our co-production partners who could push out that story in their territories, and that's our job to do it in America, if that's helpful.
I also recently heard from a German filmmaker that every region, like every province in Germany, gives money, but you have to shoot it and hire a local crew. And he's like, that's why all German movies are road movies, because they go all around Germany to get all the cash.
It's so true. We did like the color in Leipzig. Someone tell me what that is. Then we did the sound and ADR in Berlin. And then another in Hamburg. We did something. So there was a little bit of a piecemeal in that. And then the Leipzig, they held all the assets when we finally got the DCP together.
Wow. I think we're definitely out of time now. Sorry, I'm getting the throat slashing motion. So I'm so sorry we couldn't get to everyone's questions. But I wanted to thank our lovely panelists. We have Jen and Izzy and Sarah.
Thank you.
And thank you all for coming.